It's Saturday, September 18th, 2010, and I am talking with Stu. And how do you say the last name? Pronounce the last name?
Chalfant.
Chalfant, here in Simi Valley, and we're going to do an oral history. So, Stu, when the war broke out, where were you living and what were you doing?
Well, I was still in school at the time. I was living in Rockville Center on Long Island with my family, with my folks. I have a brother and two sisters, and a nice home there. And when the war started, we were all very much concerned, of course, about our going into the service and what it was going to be like. But
So when you heard the news of Pearl Harbor, do you remember where you were, or do you remember the family getting together?
I think freshman year at Dartmouth, and I was on campus when we got the news, and it was such shocking, like lightning striking. It was such shocking news that everybody was galvanized into some kind of action. There was a lot of excitement, and of course, and a lot of talk about joining the armed forces, and we'll take care of those guys. It was all bravo, mucho stuff, macho stuff, and oh golly, it was pretty exciting and pretty frightening.
Did any of your buddies there go in right away, or was it a while before some of them left? Or
Well, yeah, there was. As I recall, there was an ROTC element in the college, and some of those fellows went in pretty quickly. And others left school and joined or volunteered. There was a tremendous wave of patriotism, of course, and those young guys were caught up in that pretty much, and there was a lot of volunteering for armed services. I had to wait till I was drafted. I wanted to volunteer but could not, and I can't remember the reasons why, but there were reasons why I was not allowed to do so. But when I was drafted, that was 43, I guess, April 43.
so you were able to continue at Dartmouth for another year and a half, basically.
I just finished my first year, that's all.
Okay.
I remember when I ended up at Camp Hale, I was one of the very first people there.
And is that where when you were drafted, is that where you first were, you must have did your basic training someplace else?
I did. I went Camp Croft, South Carolina for basic training. And I'd already applied for the so-called ski troops, And from Camp Croft, I was sent by amazing transportation. I was private parlor car on the railroad to Camp Hale.
Now, how did you manage that?
I had no idea. It was amazing, definitely amazing. And I remember when I got to Camp Hale, the letdown was pretty severe, because the first thing they did, they stuck me in a barrack, and then they gave me a wheelbarrow and a shovel and a pickaxe, and I was sent up to the coal. The train came through Camp Hale and dumped the coal off the side, and it was all locked up in ice and snow from the winter, and we're sent there with a wheelbarrow and a pickaxe and a shovel to chop the coal out of the frozen piles and wheel it down to the various coal bins in all of the barracks. I thought, boy, my girlfriend persuaded me to join the so-called ski troops. She has no idea what she got me into.
The coal troops. So when you arrived at Camp Hale, do you remember what month that was?
Oh, boy.
Because you did your basic in 43.
Yeah, I think it was April.
So,
Yeah.
but you remember it being cold, so it must have already been winter.
Oh yeah, it was still winter. It was still winter.
And you mentioned you had a girlfriend at the time. Was she back in New York?
Yeah, she was back on Long Island, my hometown.
And she was the one that encouraged you to join the ski
right.
troop?
And 3 weeks after I went in, she found another guy. So I got jilted.
Did you have to
Dear
have...
John, what? I got the Dear John.
the Dear John. Now, did you have to have the 3 letters of recommendation?
Yes, I
So-
did, yeah.
And you remember who did the letters for you?
There was a man in our town. He was the father of one of my friends in high school, and he was very supportive in my desire to go. And he wrote one of the letters. I don't recall who the others were from, but I remember I was very, very pleased. I was grateful that he did that because I was very eager to get into the so-called ski troops.
So then you're at Camp Hale, and you were doing the coal. What other kinds of training did you get there besides coal digging?
Well, that took several months of coal chopping and shoveling, and as the organizations as recruits were brought in and we got organized, I was finally placed in a company. It was in the headquarters company, 2nd Battalion of the 86th, which had just formed, and I was one of the first people in that company. There were only, I think, 15 or 20 of us in the company at the time. It was just forming. So it was the very beginning of the 10th history, really.
And the 87th at that time still may have been deployed over to...
Yes, they were not with us at all. In fact, we knew nothing of the 87th at that time. But they came along later as an afterthought. And they took a lot of our thunder away because they'd already been involved. So, yeah.
So in the headquarters company, do you remember what kind of duties you had there, or was it mostly clerical stuff, or?
Well, it wasn't clerical. I was a field troop, and it was in training. I don't recall how early our formal training started. I know we were the very first unit on the rifle range, the first to go into actual rifle training. And I remember a lot of the other training drills that we went through, bayonet, et cetera, very early on. So we were in the 10th, and it wasn't even identified as the 10th Mountain. It didn't exist as the 10th Mountain. It existed only as I guess it was the 86th Infantry. And all of that came along later.
Were you also eventually there at Camp Hale trained in skiing and
Oh yeah,
rock climbing and those sort of things?
I already had skiing on my own for a year when I was in college. My first year in college, I was at Dartmouth, and Dartmouth's a great ski school. If you didn't ski when you were there, you just weren't part of the mob, you know.
So you already had some training there.
I had some experience in skiing, yes.
What about rock climbing? Did they?
No.
No.
I remember going through rock climbing school was pretty hairy, pretty harrowing. We did some pretty scary things, and I was very glad to get through it and become a qualified rock climber.
Now, are there any memories you have of Camp Hale? I know there were some German prisoners there that were around and stuff.
Yeah.
And
there was a German prison facility that was quite large, and they had quite a few troops there. I've forgotten how many there were, but they were in the hundreds, 400 or 500 perhaps, German prisoners. And we were, of course, not in contact with them at all, but we saw much of them. They were allowed out on exercise, and they organized themselves tried to show us up in marching and whatnot. They could march like you couldn't believe.
Oh yeah, I bet
Oh, yeah.
they're high stepping and
Oh,
maybe.
yeah, yeah.
And what about weekend passes? Do you recall where you would go for weekend passes?
Oh, yeah. Denver, of course, was a choice spot. And I managed to develop a nice relationship to a girl there. And we had a good time. And her father was very supportive of our relationship. And he loaned us the family car on weekends and provided the gas, even though he was on rationing.
Wow.
So we were pretty fortunate there.
So he must have really liked you, and
Yeah, I guess he did, and yeah, he was a very nice guy, and I felt very grateful for what he did for us. He made our relationship really very smooth, very easy.
hmm hmm And you maintain that relationship for.
No, that after we moved down to Swift and whatnot, that sort of fell apart because things like that were sort of ephemeral. There wasn't a lot of stability to that kind of thing in those years. Yeah.
So you would basically, when you go on your weekend passes to go see her and the family, and
Yeah.
what about Leadville? Did you? I heard stories about Leadville and visiting there.
Yeah, Leadville things got pretty wild in Leadville. All I know is I remember the story of the guys that got thrown out of the second-story window at the local hotel.
Tell me about that.
Well, there was some big fight going on, and these guys were upstairs in the thing, and some guy got thrown out of a second-story window into the snowdrift below. It didn't kill him, but he got hurt. And it was what do you call them?
It was KPs or MPs? MPs.
MPs came in and really buttoned things down. And we were pretty much restricted to barracks for quite some time until they got things straightened out. Found out who did what to whom. It was a pretty bad scene. But yeah, Leadville wasn't a pleasant place. It was not a pleasant place.
Yeah, you had better times in Denver, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What about D series? Were you involved with D series?
I remember I don't remember a great deal about the D series. I know it was very difficult. It was we were in terrible weather, and it was physically a hardship, an ordeal, part of the D series. In fact, I think they got us into situations that they hadn't anticipated, and we were pretty stressed, pretty hard pressed at times. I remember once they said they broke all of their rules and said we could have fires. We were out bivouacked, and so everybody scrounged up what the wood could. We had fires all over the crazy place, burning to keep us alive because it was so cold. But yeah, Camp Hale was a difficult camp, and our training in Camp Hale was I would say taxing to the extreme at times.
They talk about the Pando hack, the coughing because of the.
Yeah.
Do you? I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was a bronchitis that was going around, and I think it was pretty contagious. We all caught it and coughed our lungs out. It was a pretty bad situation. There wasn't anything they could medically do for us. I don't know what the medications were like in those days, but there was nothing that was really greatly helpful. And we all just went through it and survived. I think there were some that did not survive the Panoac. A few, but I don't recall. That's my impression.
At some point, you got news that you would be leaving Camp Hale and going to a new camp. And do you remember what your feelings were when you heard you were going to Camp Swift?
I don't recall if we even knew where we were going.
Oh,
We were going to leave Camp Hale, and we were put on troop trains, and went south. And a lot of guys were glad to get out of the mountains. They were heading into warmer country. Warmer country is right. We got to Swift, and it was something like 108 degrees out,
wow.
and they unloaded us, and they put us on a 25-mile forced march to see if we could take it.
Oh, man. That's a welcome to Texas.
Yeah. That was a terrible, terrible situation for a lot of guys. I think there was a couple of guys that died on that one. It was that bad, but it was just an Army's idea. Here they had this opportunity to see what it would be like to take them out of the mountains and the cold and put them in the heat, and then shove it to them and see if they could take it.
Gee. And I also heard there at Swift some of the 25-mile speed marches they would have, or something to that
It was
effect.
5 mile an hour. Five mile. Yeah, 5 miles in 50 minutes. And you had to trot and walk, trot and walk fast, trot and walk, to do 5 miles in 50 minutes. And we did those at least once a week, sometimes more. And they were hated. I just hated to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah, and coming from altitude now to sea level, basically, was there any other difficulties you had? I mean, I know it was hot, but anything else that stands out about Camp Swift and the drills?
It probably was, but I don't really recall. It was just not an easy situation. It was a difficult transformation for us to go from where we were in to end up in Swift.
And where would you go for weekend passes, or did you?
Hey, that's a good question. Camp Swift, where the heck did we go? I'm trying to think what the nearest town was. It was a good size.
Austin, I think,
It
would
was
be.
Austin. That's right. It was Austin. We went into Austin. In fact, yeah, I went to the university there, and I managed with another guy to crash a sorority party. And we met a couple of babes. And found myself a new girlfriend.
Oh, so here you already had a girlfriend that got you into the ski troops, and then you had another person that you were fond of in Denver, and now you're on to Texas.
University of Texas, right?
How'd you find out about that sorority party, or?
I don't recall, but I know it was quite an affair. And, the girl I got hooked up with, and I really fell in love with her. She was a wonderful. In fact, I thought we would probably get married. Her name was Trula Durham. Typical Southern family and Southern name, Durham, And she was the valedictorian of her class. And she was so damn bright, it was hard to be with her at times.
Now, so you, I take it you saw her then while you were at Camp Swift.
Oh yeah, we dated on a regular basis. Yeah.
And I can't remember when.
I went back to visit her after the war, in fact. And I thought perhaps our relationship would continue, but we broke up.
After you came back, and do you feel like she was? I take it through the war, then she was corresponding with you.
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't get a Dear John letter then during that time.
No. I have all of her letters still someplace.
Oh, geez.
Stashed away.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Also, eventually, someday, maybe going to the library as part of your record.
Yeah.
Right. Down the road. Anything else about Camp Swift that you stands out, or?
Not really. I think we found it was a difficult environment for us, coming down out of the Rockies and into that heat. The hot weather was. I remember that you got up in the morning and that sun was just this burning ball on the horizon, getting up, and
Yeah.
heat wave would hit you.
A good morning.
Yeah. Oh.
Now, at this point, the other two regiments were with you, the 85th and the 87th. They're at Camp Swift.
85th, but the 87th joined us later. They were off doing something else. They had gone to Kiska, etc., and Atsu, and then they came and joined us. Yeah.
So you weren't there a real long time at Camp Swift, and then you were back on trucks, headed off to the real thing. Do you remember knowing that now you were going to be deployed somewhere and be involved? Did you get a weekend pass, a final weekend pass, or final time before you left? Do you recall?
I'm sure we did. I think we were given furloughs.
Okay, yeah.
We went home. Yeah. And we knew that we would be going, but we didn't know where we would be going.
So you went back to New York for home.
That's right. Yeah.
And the last furlough. Do you remember any words of wisdom that maybe your parents gave you, or anything, or any kind of good luck, or when?
Well, I remember my father was a lieutenant in the Army in World War I, and he was sort of my mentor in a way when it came to the Army service. And I don't recall any specific advice, but I know that he was very, very supportive, and I felt quite sure of myself with him as my guide in a way.
And your siblings, they were younger.
My brother was older by 2 years. My two sisters weren't involved. My brother was he was in the U.S. in the Air Corps, as it was known then, and had served as a trainer in aerial gunnery, training guys to shoot machine guns out of bombers and whatnot, which was sort of hairy stuff in itself.
Oh yeah, that would have been.
Yeah.
So, being young and probably confident and knowing nothing's going to happen to you, then there was probably nothing you said back to your family or other than reassurance that you'd be seeing them again.
Yeah, there was always that hope and wish, of course, but these are tough times and pretty frightening. We didn't know where we were going. We had no idea how we'd be deployed. Remember, we were sent to Virginia, and we were put aboard ship. We still didn't know where we were going. Across the Atlantic and in Italy.
So somewhere probably midway, they finally told you that you'd be going to Italy, or?
I don't recall if we were even told that. I remember going past Gibraltar, we were headed into the Mediterranean. We knew we were in the Med, and a lot of us were guessing we were going to Italy, and I think we were told at that point. And we put in at Naples.
What was it like being on the ship?
Well, it was exciting for me. I loved the ocean. Crossing the Atlantic on ship was a great experience. Of course, and getting into the Mediterranean, this is all very new and very exciting. But there was always that future. You say, you know where you're heading. You have to assume that you're heading into combat, and we all knew that. So it wasn't a pleasant situation.
So you arrived at Naples, and how did you get from there to the front lines?
Well, I was in the very first contingents of the 86, and we were on trucks, I remember. I was in an advance party, and we went north, and they were literally looking for places for bivouac for the regiment, and then we came back, and then the regiment was moved up, and we were bivouacked outside of Naples.
So you went by truck then, from Naples up to
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
north. I know. I think the 85th went
We
by.
also went by boat.
Yeah, by boat.
We did too.
Okay.
Yeah, we made the last jump up the coast by boat. They took us and they put us in this beat up old wreck of a steamer that was, and we were all, had to stay below decks and whatnot. It was an awful ship. And we went up the coast and we landed at Naples. And from there we were deployed by truck up into the front itself. But I remember that was, boy, that trip up the coast in that boat was scary. And then, of course, when we got to Naples, we were trucked up. We were taken up to the little town of Cutigliano in the mountains.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you? I know my dad's regiment, the 87th, were at Pisa for a little bit, but I don't know if the 86
we
were.
were there. Yeah, we were by Pisa.
Do you remember going into Pisa and
Yeah.
seeing the Leaning Tower and all that?
Oh yeah.
And then you were sent up to Cutigliano.
Cutigliano, yeah, right.
How long? Do you remember how long you were in Cutigliano and what it was like there?
Well, we were there for months, I know. It was considered on the front, but it was a very inactive part of the front. We weren't in direct contact with the enemy. There was some shelling back and forth, random intermittent shelling, but we had no personal contact with the Germans. But it was all pretty intense stuff because we knew we were headed for it. We knew we were going to be in action. We were going into action. We didn't know where or when, but we were headed for it.
Yeah, and now you were closer hearing the shelling and.
Oh yeah.
And so then from Cutigliano, getting to the actual front lines by truck, I would imagine, and then you were with headquarters company, so.
I was Company G finally.
Okay, now.
Then I was transferred into Company G. Yeah.
And what type of weapon did you have in G, or was that still headquarters company, or G? No, I'm sorry. So when you were in G, were you a rifleman, or were you?
Rifleman, yeah. M1.
You know,
Yeah, I was, Steve O'Neill, who was from my hometown, and I were the number 1 and number 2 highest scored riflemen in the division. And I was not a rifleman when I went in, but Steve was. He was an expert marksman. But I was extremely good in training in terms of listening to instruction and doing it correctly and whatnot, and became a top flight marksman. And I remember when we got to Swift, I was called upon with another troop to put on a demonstration for a bunch of officers that were flown in, a firing demonstration. And I remember I was asked to fire at a 15-inch bullseye at 500 yards standing.
Whoa.
And I hit the bullseye 8
Whoa.
times in a row, standing.
500 yards.
500 yards.
No, I'm trying to think. A 15-inch at 500. I mean, did you? I'm assuming you had a scope.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But wow. I can only imagine that thing just jumping up and down with it.
Oh, yeah.
That is quite something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was. It was a tremendous demonstration.
Yeah.
I was very proud of myself because I was one of the top. Here I had had no training in shooting a rifle when I was a kid, and here I was a top marksman in the division. So it was quite exciting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be. That would be. So from Cutigliano, then the 86 went where on the actual front lines?
Oh, boy.
Because I think the 86 was involved with Riva Ridge.
We were very much involved in Riva Ridge, but I don't recall how we got there. It's all sort of a blank to me, a mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, and then on the I guess it was February 17th or 18th, when the 86 took River Ridge. Were you part of that assault, or were you on reserve, or?
Our company was in reserve at the foot of River Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
We were right at the base, but we didn't go up the ridge itself. But we were, Company G was in reserve in 2nd Battalion, 86.
Was there, can you recall maybe that night before, or the night of, or the day before? I mean, you knew this was it now.
Oh, yeah.
What it was like, or what the conversations were like with your buddies and stuff, or?
I don't really recall anything that specific, but I know that it was very uptight, very tense time for all of us, because we knew we were going into action, and we had no idea what it was to be like. I think we were all pretty confident that we had the best training we could possibly have. So I think that's what carried us, really. We were immensely well trained, I think, in the 10th. Probably more so than many troops in other parts of the Army.
That's what I keep hearing, that a lot of training,
Yeah.
a lot of time. So on that first night, then, you were in reserve. Word must have come down that River Ridge was taken,
Oh, yeah.
and then what happened with you then? Were you moved somewhere else, or did you?
Boy, I really don't recall, how that played out. All we knew is we were in the front at that point. We were deployed, and we would be in contact with the enemy. It was some time before I was, my unit itself was in a direct firefight with the Germans. And I don't recall that event, but I know that it happened.
But it didn't. So you weren't involved with River Ridge directly, but the next day Belvedere was taken. The next night Belvedere was taken.
Yeah.
And if you were on reserve, you might still have been on the reserve even with that Belvedere.
I think we weren't. Because the 85th was pretty much involved in taking Belvedere.
85th and 87th.
Yeah.
So, which would have made sense. They would have kept you in reserve, and then you would come up next. So when do you recall your first firefight, or actual? Do you? You may not specifically remember, but generally you might.
Well, I remember that when we were finally moved up to Cutiliano, I led several patrols out into no man's land, which was pretty scary, expecting to draw fire from the Germans. And we went all the way up to we crossed an area of about 2 miles of open space. It was no man's land, into a little town called Ospitali, which is like the word hospital but in Italian, Ospitali. And expecting to run into German fire there. And we got into Ospitali, and the town was abandoned. There was no one there. I remember the relief we all experienced that, because we crossed this open field of some hundreds of yards. We were on skis, and
pretty
completely
exposed. Yeah.
We could have been just mowed down. And every step of the way, we were expecting to get to draw fire. We got all the way into Hospitality, and the place was abandoned.
Yeah. So you did go on some ski patrols then, while you were in Cutigliano.
I led a lot. In fact, I was trained in patrolling, and the problem is, in training, I turned out the best record for night patrols. So, boy, was I called upon to do patrols.
Yeah.
So I took out night patrols almost every night behind German lines, and got pretty good at it. But it was pretty harrowing stuff.
Yeah.
I remember one night we passed a German patrol that was going in the other direction, and we were only feet apart, and we all lay down, and just lay absolutely silent. But they went by,
Wow.
and then we moved on. And,
Man, that must be, because you're out there by yourself, and
yeah.
and that's it, gee. I've read about those some of those night patrols, but don't recall ever meeting someone specifically until now that who
Oh,
was
really?
who was out leading those things. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so then they took Belvedere and Mount Tarasha and that area, and then I think there was a second offensive that happened as you're moving towards Casteldiano. Do you recall any after your ski patrols and the next times of being in combat or for your company or?
No, I don't. I don't think we had. I know we moved up into several towns, small towns, and we're surprised that the Germans had moved out and we moved in. So it was a shifting front, and there was not a lot of contact with the enemy, but there were a lot of maneuvering and displacement going on. Where they'd move out, we'd move in. The Germans were very much, we were told, very much aware of who we were, and we were highly regarded, so there was a lot of fear, I think, on their part, more so than on our part. And they sort of got out of our way. There was, I don't recall having any direct contact in a firefight with the Germans.
And when you would go on leave or a weekend pass, if you were able to get him, where would you go there in Italy, or do you recall going any place?
Oh boy. Passes in Italy. Well, after the war ended, there was, I was sent to Rome along with other guys for an extended stay, and that was quite pleasant. I remember going to the opera, and I was very fond of opera, and I went to the opera in Rome. Well, that was a great treat. I can't recall what I saw, but it was one of my favorite operas, I know. And yeah, those are special times.
Do you recall anything else in there from Belvedere to Lake Garda in that time frame? Any other incidents that come to mind?
Not specifically.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the 86th history and where they went. I know they were all together. And I know that there were the Brazilian troops on one side at one point, and I'm not sure who was on the other side, but
the Brazilian troops raided and stole our personal property out of our packs, and we were away from them at one point. I remember there was a lot of resentment.
Yeah, my dad tells that the Brazilians were way too loud, and he was fearful that if they were too close to them, that they would give them away.
Yeah.
So he had his own concerns.
Yeah, we were also in contact with the 90 Deuce, the 92nd, the only black division. And I know that there was some friction with them, but not a lot, but there was some. I remember running into a group of them at a watering hole where they were filling up their water jugs, and there was I like these guys myself. When I was in school, high school, I took guitar lessons from a young black man in a very well-known family in our town, and a very much loved family, and he was a great guitarist, and I took guitar lessons from him. And when I was in the Army and I ran into these fellows, I was all eager to talk to them about music. I was a jazz nut.
Yeah, so they were, yeah, the 92nd was on one side and the Brazilians on the others.
Yeah.
And what about some of your buddies there? Did you lose any of your buddies there in combat that do you recall any? I don't know if your particular company may have taken a lot of casualties or not, but
We had casualties, and I'm trying to remember. I'm sure that I did, and I don't really recall. I think some of that was so painful at times that
Yeah.
you don't hang on to memories like that.
yeah.
Yeah, we lost some nice people, some good guys, and I don't recall.
And did you see a lot of German prisoners along the way? Do you remember seeing many of them? I know they were, like you're saying, kind of getting out of the way too, but
Well, I remember taking German prisoners
Mhm.
on hills that we took from them, and sending them back. I remember one prisoner in particularly. He was wearing some kind of it was like a tunic of some type.
Mhm,
I couldn't find a way to. We didn't know whether he had a weapon underneath.
Mhm, mhm.
And I remember they stood him up in front of me, and I took my knife out, and I grabbed hold of the front of the thing and slid it down the middle, and opened it up, and to see if he was armed.
Sure.
And I remember saying, I found one thing. There was a package of tobacco, and we picked it, and he says, "Tobacco, tobacco." Give him back his tobacco.
He didn't mind being prisoner as long as he had his tobacco. Yeah. And the Italian people, did you ever come across, have occasion to talk with any Italian families along the way, or were you remember being bivouacked in any of the homes? Or
Oh yes, yeah. In fact, up in the mountains when we were there, we were bivouacked in Italian homes, and I remember one family in particular where we stayed they were really nice to us and very courteous, and we gave them as much food as we could, canned GI cans and whatnot, because they were hard pressed to have anything to eat, and it was some very good and warm relationships with some of the Italian people. We felt very badly that they were destitute, terrible situation, and we gave them whatever food we could spare. So, but I remember that quite well.
And then when I believe the division was at Garda when the war ended, and then did you have any occupation duty or anything right after the end of the war, or do you even remember when they pronounced the end of the war, what was going on and what your feelings were, I bet at that time?
Well, the feelings was one of great joy and great relief. I remember that, but I don't remember exactly where we were. Were we at the south end of Lake Garda? Somewhere there.
Yeah, somewhere I think you.
Yeah.
The division.
I think we were. Yeah. When the war ended.
But you remember going to Rome and going to the opera. Someone else told me that they also went to the opera in Rome right after the war.
Of course, the Roman Opera Company was world famous, and they had also what is the other Italian opera company? I've forgotten.
I don't know. I'm not familiar
They were
with
in
opera.
Rome at the time, and they had joined forces, so they were putting on 2 or 3 operas a day, and for people to go, for the GIs to go and hear. So we heard a lot of opera. It was great.
And you got to see a few of the sights of Rome at the same time.
Oh yeah. The ruins in Rome were very fascinating. Rome itself as a city was a delightful place. It was. Yeah.
They talk about the camaraderie with of the 10th and the singing and do you recall a lot of singing going on?
A lot of what?
Singing, you know, they like to sing the songs.
Oh, singing.
Yeah, and
Yes, yeah, we did sing. Yeah,
yeah, because they talked about that camaraderie and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
So, so the war ended, and then you were sent back by ship back home.
Yes, we were. We were on a Victory ship going back home. Landed at Norfolk, Virginia. I remember the crossing, the Atlantic crossing was. We had some rough weather, and it was pretty tough for a while. But we were all glad to get home, and I was looking forward to that nice big furlough we'd been promised.
Yeah, because at that time I think you were getting the furlough only to come back to get ready to go to Japan.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we were slated to be among the first troops to hit the beach of Japan, and it was a great relief when the war ended. We didn't have to go do that.
Were you at home when you got news that the war in Japan had ended, or?
I don't recall where I was specifically, but I remember the news was a tremendous shot in the arm, tremendous relief, huge amount of joy about the war ending. Yeah, that was, boy, because we knew that we were going on into heavy stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Great relief.
Yeah, that's why I think you guys were sent back early to get ready to be the first to go over.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, so other thoughts about being with the 10th that come to mind. I'm thinking here of what other. Your brother made it back okay?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, the 10th. That was tough training. The D series, the winter weather, the cold. I remember when we had one night, it was 55 below zero that night. It's hard to imagine what that's like.
Yeah, yeah.
It's life-threatening.
Yeah, it is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't breathe without frosting your lungs unless you breathe properly. It's terrible. It's a terrible situation. But we survived. I don't think we lost anyone that cold that night.
Have you been back to Italy since the end of the war?
Yes.
And in that same area where you were?
Yeah, we went through the mountain towns, like Cutigliano. We were.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we drove through the whole area.
So you didn't go with the group, you went on your own?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we stopped at a church.
What?
We stopped at the church and talked to the priest.
That's right, I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, I know a number of veterans who have gone back either with the group, the association, or on their own, like you did.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the guys who died, his father came over to Italy, and I'd forgotten all of that situation.
Yeah.
It's all out of my head, gone. Yeah.
Well, that was more than 65 years ago. You
Yeah.
know, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
He also was wounded.
Oh, you were wounded there too,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and by shrapnel or by?
No, it was classified as a wound, but I was buried alive. We took a direct hit on a dugout, and I got buried, and fortunately the guys dug us out. I remember lying there, a guy named Smitty was lying across me, and I was on my back, pinned under this tremendous weight
Yeah.
of
Wow.
beams and sandbags and whatnot. could barely breathe. And I knew right then and there I was going to die. I couldn't move. And Smitty was unconscious. He was moaning and groaning and breathing in my ear, but I couldn't get him to move.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly there was this, I could hear a shovel slamming into the earth above me. And suddenly there was this break and this rush of fresh air came in.
Yeah,
And
wow.
I could breathe. And in a matter of minutes, these guys had dug us out. I remember uncovering Smitty, and I said to them, take Smitty out first. And they helped him up out of the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And they helped me out, took us up to the aid station. But we were goners, and we were that close to losing.
Oh yeah, gee, that would have been. And that was an artillery shell that buried you.
Yeah.
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 That's have you I know I was able to get copies of the daily reports from my dad's company. I don't know if you have ever had looked at morning reports from your company or.
Well, when I was first sergeant, I had to fill them out.
Yeah, lucky you. Oh shoot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What about memorabilia from that time? There any photos that you have? I know you said you had the letters from the girlfriend and.
I don't think I have any photos. No.
And is there anything else you recall in the past of him mentioning his time with the 10th that maybe we missed or?
Yeah, after you got out of the hospital,
When he would.
without permission, and you and another guy found a little Fiat.
Wait, what?
You found a little Fiat.
Yeah, we commandeered, as it's called, a Fiat on the side of the road. You had to stop about every 2 miles and find water to pour it on the block because the radiator was broken, and we were trying to keep it cool enough to keep us running. Anyway, that was a terrible experience. Then we went to go across the Po River, and there was one bridge, a pontoon bridge across the Po, and we got this little Fiat under the bridge, and a Sherman Mark V tank behind us put its nose up against the rear window of the Fiat and began to push us across the bridge.
Oh,
And the whole back of the Fiat caved in, and the glass shattered and whatnot. And these guys were just about to run over us.
oh man.
And we got across to the other side, and I was frantically waving at these guys and trying to steer this car that was getting mashed into the dirt. And they pushed us off to the side of the road. Boy, was I relieved. Oh, God. Oh, that was a terrible situation. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have a video of the building of that bridge, that pontoon bridge,
Oh, yeah.
when they did that, because I know some of the other.
Oh, we've seen that. I've seen that video. Yeah.
Yeah, so that which was interesting because
Yeah.
to see how it was.
Yeah.
So you commandeered the Fiat. I know a number of the soldiers as they were moving towards the Po were taking bicycles and anything they could find, and you found a Fiat.
We found a Fiat. Yeah.
Without a radiator, but still.
Well, you know, gasoline was cheap. We were stealing it out of the tanks of military vehicles.
And then you found out that the hospital that you had gone without permission, had moved, and you got back to the hospital and they hadn't even missed you.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So this was after your
After
the shelling, and then you went back to the hospital for the station there, and then.
I was placed in the hospital, and then we went on this escapade, and we got back into the hospital before they found out. They said, "We've been looking for you. Where have you been?" We said, "We've been right here."
Oh boy, what a time. Well, those are about the questions I have regarding the war at that period of time. In looking back, you know, you guys have been labeled the greatest generation. What do you think about that and that whole period of time of when the world was at war? And do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I don't think we saw ourselves as anything special. I really don't. I think we saw ourselves for what we were, a bunch of GIs who happened to be in that situation. There wasn't much we could do one way or another. We had to go with the flow. We had to do what we were told to do. I guess in many ways we were amazing that we accomplished what we accomplished. We did what we did. That we were we were doing things way above and beyond what we never thought we'd do in life. And that was something. I don't know. It's hard for me to recall at this point a lot of this stuff. It seems like it was a century ago in somebody else's life.
Well, as a descendant, and you know, I'm here and I'm listening how quiet and everything is, and you know, we live in a country that has been blessed in many ways, and what the world would be like had we lost that war, how different it would have been.
Oh.
You know, it's
I don't think that Nazi Germany would have had the strength to hold on if they won, that we would overwhelm them in one way or another as a people. We would rise up and strike them down. I just don't think they had it. They didn't have the stuff to do it. I think I was very fortunate that I was in the situation I was in. I was with a bunch of wonderful guys in the 10th, and we were all mutually supportive and very capable, very active, and we took care of ourselves. I don't think the Germans had it. I don't think they didn't have a chance against us. I'd like to think that at least.
And I think you're right. Well, I want to thank you again for not only your service at that time, but also this opportunity to hear your story, because I just I'm amazed each time I hear the stories of the different things that have gone on, different experiences. So.
Well, those are parlous times, as they say.
And Stu, now you're how old?
Right now, what am I, 86?
87.
87, and you'll be 88. Your birthday is
In July.
July.
I just
had a birthday a couple months ago.
87,
Okay, I'm going to stop it now, and then we can just chat about other things.
Oh,
Is there anything else that you... I
can't think of anything right now. But after you leave.